Hello, welcome back to FordeeTV. I'm your host, Fordee. So guys, hopefully you remember in the last video, we created a rain animation using only the plugins that come with After Effects on top of a still photo. It could have been on top of a video as well. It didn't have to be a still photo. It just looked really cool adding it to a still photo, right? Anyway, you can go ahead. Up on the top, I'm going to link a card so you can watch the other video. Also in the description, because some things we won't go over. Let me show you what we're going for while using Trapcode Particular, instead of using the plugins that come with After Effects. This is the final piece. You'll see the rain is coming down. In fact, we could even give it some angle by increasing the wind. And down here, you'll see that when the raindrops hit the floor, they explode a little bit, right? Making those droplets splatter, etc., etc. Let's jump into After Effects. I'm going to delete these top 3 layers, which are the layers we will create for this composition. And then I'm just going to show you, if I turn on these 3 layers, background rain, foreground rain, bouncing rain, I'm going to show you what it looked like using the plugins inside After Effects, right? So definitely pretty cool. However, the bouncing rain right here doesn't look as realistic as it's going to look by using Particular. However, yeah, still not bad, huh? I'm going to go ahead and delete these 3 layers. We don't need them. In order to create these 3 layers, one is just an MP3 file of a sound of rain. The other one is the photo moved around to fit our composition the way we want it. And the last one is a layer that has CC drizzle applied to create these ripple effects right here in the solid layer, right? So if I go ahead and press play, I'm going to turn off the audio. You'll see right here in this area, these little ripples that are happening like puddles, right? So if you want to learn how to do that, watch the previous video. I'm not going to go over it for this video, right? So the first thing we want to do is apply Trapcode Particular. We're going to come up to layer, select new, select solid, because Particular has to be applied to a layer, right? So I'll go ahead and change the name from black solid to Particular, or call it Particular. And I'll make sure that it's our comp size, right? If you're using a different comp size, like 1080p, 720p, etc., you would just make sure it's the comp size. I'll say OK, boom, now we have a black solid. I'm going to come over here to my effects and presets. You can start typing in Particular, and boom, it's there. I'll go ahead and drag it in. I'll leave a link in the description where you can buy Particular if you're interested. It's amazing. It's not just to create, it's a particle emitting system. It's not just to create things like rain. You can create explosions, fireballs, light streaks, etc. Huh? Anyway, so if I go ahead and bring my playhead back to the beginning and press spacebar, you'll see these particles are being emitted from the center, from a point, and obviously that's not what we want. We're going to come over here to the effect controls for this particular layer. You can see we have Particular here. We'll click on Designer. After we do so, let's make sure this is in the view so you can see everything. You'll see on the left there's presets. These are presets for the blocks below, etc. We're not going to mess with any of that. We're just going to do this manually. Huh? We're going to change the emitter type from point to box. When we do that, instead of emitting points from one singular point, it's emitting points from a box based on the size that we have here. Right now, X, Y, and Z in 3D is linked to a 500 pixel size. We are going to unlink that, set it to individual, and we're going to turn off the emission from the Y property, right? Now it's only emitting from X and Z. Next, let's come over to motion real quick, and we're going to turn our velocity off. When I set that to 0, you'll notice it's just emitting them right here in a single line. And that's kind of what we want. We're making some progress. Next, the emitter size, instead of being 500 pixels, because we're working in 1080 as our width and our height of our composition, I want this to be larger than 1080. Huh? So we could set this, I don't know, to 1400, for example, by 1400. Whoops. Retype. Next, as far as the amount of particles, we'll leave it set to 100 right now, but we can go ahead and make a change to this later. The position right here doesn't matter. We will make the change inside the effects panel over here later. Next, we want to turn gravity on. If you look down here, we come over the gravity block, and we want to set this. Let's set it to 1000, right? there are positive and negative values. If I make a negative 100, the particles are going to go up, right? Let's set it to 1,000 for now. We're going to increase this number later. The physics time factor is a multiplier, right? It can be used for a lot of things. So we can say if we put this, set this to 2, it will be 2 times the gravity, right? 2,000. Also, you could animate the physics time factor. So for example, if you created an explosion in particular, you could set, a one keyframe to be 0, and that would freeze the particles in time and space, right? So, okay, so this is looking all right so far. We're just going to go ahead and click on apply for now, right? And now if I go ahead and press play, boom, they're emitting right here, right from this center point. Let's fix that first. We'll come over here, we'll click on the arrow from emitter, and we're going to change our position as we drag this up. We want this to be outside. We want it to start quite a bit above, huh? We don't want it to just start right there. So why don't we set this to 0, for example. I'll go ahead and press play. Awesome. If we drag our playhead to the beginning, one of the things we'll notice are there are no particles, right? Because they're being birthed from above, right? Now, if we want to make sure that on frame 0, we have rain, which we do want, right? We don't want rain to all of a sudden start as it's playing. What, were we walking down the street and magically it just started? No! So anyway, over here in the emitter section, we want to come down to emission extras. We'll click on the arrow here. We'll change the pre-run from 0%. We'll set it to 100. And now when we bring our playhead right here, look, we have our droplets, right? These droplets obviously right now are just spheres. We're going to change that, excuse me, so that they are streaks by turning on motion blur, right? When we turn on motion blur here and we press play, excuse me, I need to drink some water, huh? So, as you can see, now we're starting to see some streaks. That motion blur is picked up from the movement of the particle, right? So let's click on that arrow right there. Let's come down here to physics and change it from 1,000 to 3,000. When we bump that up, notice that these things became longer. Let's change the physics multiplier from 1 to 1.5, and bam, now look at that. That's looking nice. I'll come back to the beginning. I'll press spacebar. So it's looking good. Maybe we come back over here to the emitter and we move this back up even further, right? Next, maybe we change this from 3,000 to 4,000 in the physics section of gravity. And now I think we've got what we want, right? I'll press spacebar right now to check. And these things are looking good. However, maybe some are dying, right? So I'll come up here, I'll click on this arrow to hide the options of the emitter and come to the particle. Right now, these things are living for 3 seconds. Now, if we watch this, chances are actually that 3 seconds is long enough. But we could change this, right? To set it to 4, we could set it to 2. Let's watch to see where these particles are stopping. It looks like 2 seconds is even fine, right? And the reason maybe this will matter is if we want to change, for example, the size over life, we can click on this arrow right here. If you can't see presets, just drag this over. Then you can click on the presets button, click on this, and this is going to say, in the beginning of its life, be full size. At the end of its life, I want you to be 0 size, scale down to 0. So that's sweet, that's sweet, 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 sweet. Obviously, we can change the size of the particles here. It's set to 5. I think that's fine, right? So let's go ahead and play again. So that's looking good, right? We may even, if we want these streaks to be longer, we increase the amount of gravity. One other thing that we can do is come to the emitter, and right now we're only putting out 1,000 or 100 particles a second. What if we switch it from 100 to 800, right? Now we have a lot more rain. However, look at that dot that just appeared. To fix that, all we have to do is drag that out of our scene so it gets some movement before it comes into our view. If I press play, boom. Now we see more movement, right? Now, as far as seeing what's happening when it gets down here, it's very difficult because of the color, because of the ripples that are happening, but don't worry, we're gonna figure that out in a second. What we want it to do is when it comes down here, we want it to hit the floor and we want it to bounce up and make like a little splash, right? In order to do that, this image, it doesn't actually have a floor, so we have to create a floor. Let's do that. We'll come up here to layer, we'll say new, we'll select the solid. Now for this floor, we want the width to be double the width of our composition. So if our composition is 1080 by 1080, we want the width to be 2160, right? That means twice the width. You'll see why in a second. I'm going to change this to be called floor. I'll press enter, boom. Now we just have this big solid right here. Obviously that's not what we want. We want to rotate this, right? So before we rotate it, let's come over here. While the floor is selected, we'll turn it into a 3D layer by clicking on this right here, and we'll switch the active camera to left. When we do that, we'll see the left view of the camera, and this plane right here is our ripple layer. If we click on the eye right here to show and hide that layer, that's the ripple layer. What we want to do is rotate this new layer that we created so that it lines up more or less with the other plane. I can either come up here to my rotate tool, or I could select the floor, press R, and what we want to do is rotate it on X, right? So as we rotate on X, we don't know exactly what that rotation is, right? And we don't want to parent it because I don't want it to be exact. I want it to sit a little bit above, a little bit off, etc. Next, while having the selection tool selected, we can come here and click on the Z axis to drag this down, and that's nice, right? One of the other things is still we have orientation up, and we can turn the orientation right here, right? Bam. That's more or less good. We'll come over here to Y, we'll drag this a little bit over, Z down, bam, 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 little bit over. I don't know, something like this is good. Now that we've aligned this, if we come, well, let's leave this view and let me show you what we're going to do. Then we'll come back and we'll see how it's being affected. I'll select the active camera, and right now we see this plane. It's in our view. Let's turn it off by clicking on this eyedropper right here. Next, inside the particular layer, we will select it, and now we want to turn on the physics. We can hide some of these by clicking on these little arrows here. We'll come over here into physics, we'll change it from air and select bounce. Now what we're saying is we want these particles to do something, we want them to bounce, but they need to be told what to interact with, right? If I come over here to bounce and I click on this arrow, I can change my floor layer from none to floor. We named it floor over here. That's all you have to do, right? The floor mode being infinite plane, layer size, layer alpha depends on what, if we have it set to infinite plane, that means that it's going to go all the way, right? However, it doesn't always work the way it should, I think. And that's why I made it double the width so that it would extend past what it would look like. Because if you select this ripples layer, notice that it is here. This is 1080 by 1080. We use the motion tile to cover this area. Infinite plane should make it so that these areas get particles, but they don't on the bounce for some reason. I don't know why. Huh? So the fix is making the width of this floor layer double, right? Come back over to the particle layer, and now we're saying that we want things to bounce. So let's go ahead, we'll scrub back, we'll press spacebar, and you can see they're bouncing, but it would be easier to see if we select the floor and we come over here to active camera and we set it to left. Look at these parts. These are all coming from the bounce. If we scrub in our timeline, you'll see them all bouncing there. We can come over to the particular, select it, and then we can tell it, instead of the collision event being bounced, we could say that we want you to die, stop, be killed. When you click that, this is the only downside I have not figured out how to fix. Huh? You see all these little white dots? These are particles. Huh? And as we are scrubbing through the timeline down here, these white dots shouldn't exist. What should happen is these particles should come down, hit the floor, and then disappear, right? However, we're going to look for a workaround for that. If we change, come over here to the particle, change it to maybe 1.5. Let's see. No, maybe 1. And what we're trying to do is make those particles live shorter so that they don't hit that, huh? Maybe 0.9. And what number is this? It depends, huh? We're going to see, and we may have to change it again. Now, making those die faster, that's better. Now, probably, hopefully, we don't see that. However, is this creating the little droplet explosions? It is not. So I'm going to change from over here to the left to the active camera, and I'm going to press spacebar to make sure our raindrops look good. Still looking nice, right? Now what I want to happen, the white dots are not as prevalent here on the floor plane. However, what I want to happen is I want to come over here, close the physics, and I want to go to my aux system. I want to turn the emitter from off to at bounce event. What that's saying is, soon as you bounce, emit particles, right? And right now it's saying 100% of the time I want you to emit particles. So I'll go ahead and rewind and press spacebar. And what's happening is every time those droplets hit this floor plane, particles are being created. However, I want more than 10 particles to be created on those bounce events. Let's set it to 80. How about that? So next, we also want to create some particle velocity. We don't want it just to kind of bounce barely. We want this puppy to bounce up. So if I press 60, look at these little puddles that are now happening, right? So I'll press spacebar. Beautiful. But what is one of the problems? One of the problems is there's way too many of them. So we can turn the emit probability from 100 to 60, let's say, or 30. Now we have quite a bit less, right? Next, if I press play, looking good, baby. One of the other things you'll notice, particles are happening way back here above the street. That's not what we want. To fix this, remember, over in the emitter, in the designer, we set the emitter to be 1400 in the Z size. What if we change this to 1200? Whoops. I'll go ahead and close the layer. I press enter twice by accident. Notice when I set it to 1200, it took less particles in Z space. What if I set it to 1000? Boom, even less. What if I set it to 900? Again, this is you play with it. I'm not exactly positive what number to put, and I didn't write anything down for this tutorial, to be like, yeah, let's use that. Now I could also come here and then slide these particles a little bit in Z space, maybe minus 15, and now they shouldn't be hitting over here, right? The next thing I want to do is, we can now close the emitter for the master, right? The next thing I want to do is come down here to the aux system and let's make some other changes, right? The life right now is set to half a second. So these things, after they hit and they create 80 particles when they hit, that's this little droplet explosion is 80 particles from one particle. That's happening 30% of the time, and it's living for a half second. You can change how long it lives if you want. Half second is probably fine, right? Next, if we want to change the size, which we definitely should. Right now, this size 5 is the same as the water droplets. Is too big for these little explosions. Let's set it to 2, see what that looks like. That's looking better. Let's go ahead and rewind. Press spacebar to preview it. Now again, these brighter dots, these are particles that for some reason, when you set the bounce, what it does when it bounces and you set it to kill, for some reason, some particles live anyway. I don't know if this is a bug or what. I did some research. I checked every setting. I can't figure it out. I'm going to have to email Red Giant and see what they say. So, okay, this is looking nice, but maybe we even want a bit less, so we can come over to the emit probability, set it to 20, and now we have even less, and I'll go ahead and press play. Next, okay, that's looking awesome. One of the other things we can do is change size over life. We can click on the drop here, change the preset, and say start at full, and when you die, go smaller. Then maybe that will end up making us change our emit probability to 30%. Another thing that we might want to do is change our opacity over life. Maybe we set this also start fully opaque and then go to nothing. Let's preview our changes because who knows what this is looking like, right? Okay, this is looking better. Maybe we want more particles when it collides. Set this to 120. That should make those little particle explosions slightly bigger, right? And we can, of course, increase the velocity to 80, for example. It should make those explosions a little bit wider, etc., right? And so, again, the one big problem we're having here are these white dots, right? These white dots are the particles that come if you go up to the physics section and you have the collision events set to kill, right? So how do we fix this? I'm not positive, We can see if we select the floor, and then we change the active camera and we set it to left. Whoops. Now we can see right here those full particles that are happening, No bueno. The other thing is these things are dying very quickly. I think that's because of the life of the particle. So let's go back to the particular layer. We'll select the particle drop down here. We'll change the life. We'll set it to 1 maybe. And let's see. What did that do? It made these brighter here, right? it is what it is. So another thing we could try, right, is maybe the size over life right here, or the opacity over life will come here, and maybe we change this and we go like that, and maybe this point, let's click right there, maybe this point is dropped here. That fixes a lot of it, but not all of it, right? And that's a little irritating. So again, press spacebar, and we can see our rain here. And let's switch the preset back to here. Let's turn or put the life to 2 or 3 seconds maybe. Boom, that's better. We're gonna twirl this down. We'll select the emitter, and maybe we set this to 750. Let's change our view from left to active camera. We'll press spacebar. And looking all right. I'm going to go ahead and turn the audio on so you can see it or hear it with the audio. We'll turn this back to the beginning. Make sure the audio is on. Press spacebar. So another thing is these are quite bright down here, right? Another thing we can do, if we click on the arrow of the emitter, click on the physics arrow and come down to aux system. You didn't have to close them out, it just makes it easier to navigate, right? Is we can come over here to the color, select the eyedropper, and pick something in the scene, right? So maybe something that's not too bright, but it's not too dark. It will change the color of those exploded droplets. It will make more sense. It selected this kind of greenish color. We'll click on it, or bluish green, and we're gonna drag this up, make it just a bit brighter, huh? Because we wanna see those droplet explosions. We'll come back to the beginning, press spacebar. And that sells it a bit better, right? Because pure white, that doesn't look right. And of course, this could even be more gray, huh? Bring it back over here. And I think that's looking pretty good. And maybe, you know, in the end, if we don't figure out, we're not going to figure out in this video, because I tried for a while to see how we could get rid of these particles that basically, when they are hitting the floor, they're not dying, they are just creating a particle that exists. It's not bouncing, it's not doing anything, and that's in our view. And how do we get rid of it? We tried several workarounds, but they're there. Could you just say that, you know what, it's hail? It is. I mean, when you watch it, legitimately, rain could be just like this. These could be little pieces of hail. So, anyways, guys, I hope you liked this tutorial. You found it useful. You learned a little something in particular. And yeah, so please like, share, subscribe, save the video. Share it with your friends. It means the world to me, guys. Until next time, I'm out.